Hello students and welcome to your fun introduction to music theory. I am Dr. Richards and I cannot wait to get started. This week, in week 1, we will be learning about the basics of music theory. This lesson will include information about the staff and of musical clefs, such as the treble clef and the bass clef, and even the C clef. Writing music on a staff is also called common notation. The staff, or staves, plural, is written as 5 lines. The majority of notes are placed on one of these lines or on the spaces in between these lines. Extra ledger lines may be added to showcase a note that is positioned above or below the staff. Through the use of bar lines, the staff is divided into measures or bars. A double bar line, either heavy or light, is used to mark the ends of larger sections in music. Some common examples of when you would use a double bar line would be at the end of an introduction of a song to mark the first verse, and at the end of each verse and chorus, and of course at the very end of the piece. However, the end of the piece is always marked with a heavy double bar line. If you have ever seen a musical staff before, then you would know that there are many different kinds of symbols and markings that can appear above and below the staff. The notes and rests are what we perform, either playing the note on our instrument or staying silent for the duration of a rest. Other examples of symbols that can be found on a musical staff include the treble clef symbol and the bass clef symbol. The key signature, which tells us which notes to play and how many sharps or flats there are. The time signature, this tells us how many notes are in a measure. Tempo markings, which denote how fast or slow to play. Dynamic markings, which tell us how soft or loud to play. Repeats and other musical roadmap signs, which tell us where to go next. And accents, which tell us how to perform certain notes. The staff is read from left to right. Staffs or staves are read beginning at the top of the page, one staff at a time, unless they are connected. Staffs can be connected to form a system of staves by a vertical line on the left-hand side. Systems such as the one you see in front of you now indicate that they need to be played together at the same time by the same musician, such as a pianist, or by multiple musicians, such as all of you. Staves can also be connected by their bar lines. Furthermore, staves played by similar instruments or voices, such as piano or a brass section, can be connected or grouped together by braces or brackets at the beginning of each line. Now we will move on to identifying notes on the treble clef. The lines on the treble clef are as follows: E, G, B, D, and F. Now, there are many acronyms and mnemonic devices used to remember this order. For example, every good boy does fine. E, G, B, D, and F. Or, every good boy deserves fudge. Sorry, ladies, I couldn't quite find any acronyms or mnemonic devices to fit you yet, but there's always, room to look for that in the future, and we can always make our own. Now, the spaces on the treble clef are named as follows: F, A, C, and E. This is my favorite one because it spells space, and that is quite hard to get. That's quite hard to forget since we all have one. I don't know why that's so funny. I would do that again.
No, that's good. Leave it.
Now, there are also notes that go above and below the staff and are formed on the spaces below the staff and between the ledger lines. All these notes that go above and below the ledger lines are easy to identify when you realize that every note follows the same pattern. It's almost like the alphabet, if the alphabet stopped at G. Let's try it. One note down from E is... That's right. One note down from E is D. And one note down from D is what? That's right. One note down from D is C. Great job. Now, it's important to note, pun intended, that after every space is a ledger line. So after D, a space below the staff, C will be on a ledger line. Below C is B, which will be on a space. And notice again that I leave the ledger line for C even though no note is on the C ledger line. Now, let's try this again, but going above the staff this time. The top line of the staff is F. Therefore, the following note must be... That's right. The following note after F must be G, which is on a space above the ledger line. Now, after G comes... That's right. After G comes A, which will be written on a ledger line. The next note after A is... B. That's right. Correct again. Man, you guys know so much already. The next note after A is B. And notice that we keep the ledger line from the A note, even though we aren't writing in an A. Now we'll move on to identifying notes on the bass clef. The notes that are on the lines of the bass clef are as follows: G, B, D, F, and A. One way to remember this is, good boys do fine always, G, B, D, F, and A. Or, good boys deserve fudge always, G, B, D, F, and A. The notes that are on the spaces of the bass clef are as follows: A, C, E, and G. One way to remember this is, all cows eat grass, A, C, E, and G. The difference between these two clefs is that the bass clef generally plays notes that are below middle C, and the treble clef generally plays notes that are above middle C. You will notice that what is an A on the bass clef is an F on the treble clef. Another way to identify the notes on a bass clef is to think of the bass clef as a treble clef, but read two notes above the note you are reading, or two whole steps above the note you are reading, as we will study later. For example, on a treble clef, this note is an A. On the bass clef, a note in the same position is a C. So, knowing your treble clef notes can really help you learn your bass clef notes too. Now that we've discussed the two most common clefs, we will discuss some of the uncommon clefs. There are movable clefs. This is called the C clef. This means that whatever line this clef centers on is the middle C. You may be wondering, but Dr. Richards, how do we know when to use a bass clef or a treble clef? Well, that's a great question. The answer can depend on which instrument you are writing for. For example, the right hand on the piano plays in the treble clef, and the left hand on the piano plays in the bass clef. Or you can consider how some instruments like the flute, the violin, and the saxophone read in the treble clef, and instruments like the tuba, the trombone, and the cello read in the bass clef. However, when you are composing, you may want to keep in mind where middle C is. This is the most common split between the bass clef and the treble clef. Notes can be written in the bass clef that are above middle C, and notes can be written in the treble clef that are below middle C. It really depends on the range of the instrument you are writing for and in which clef they are most comfortable reading in. For example, a saxophone player would generally not be very comfortable reading in a bass clef, and a tuba player would not generally be very comfortable reading in a treble clef. A good rule of thumb to remember is that music is easier read and written when most of the notes on the staff contain fewer ledger lines. You may also see this 8 below a treble clef. This means that the treble clef represents the same notes as normal, but simply down an octave in a lower range. Some singers are more comfortable singing in the treble clef, but the notes they sing are meant to sound lower, such as a tenor vocalist. Now that we have reviewed the basics about clefs and note identification, I will have an assignment for you all to complete. Below each note, please identify the pitch. Now, when we are writing notes, the note head is an oval shape. Some are open and others are filled to represent their duration. Most notes need stems. Stems are vertical and should be about the same height of the staff. You may be wondering, but Dr. Richards, when do you write note stems that would go up versus note stems that would go down? And that's a great question. The note stem, when going down, is written on the left side of the note head. You would write a note stem going down when you are writing notes that are above the middle line of the staff. You would write a note stem going up, to be on the right side of the note, for notes below the middle line of the staff. Notes on the middle of the staff can have stems going up or down. Thank you all so much for joining me in this week's lesson, 15-minute lesson on your fun introduction to music theory. I hope you all had fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye!